Hi, it's Nick here from Conservation Careers and welcome to the podcast. Now today we're speaking to Lucy Standing, who's the founder of Brave Starts, which offers career change and startup business programs to help people in their over 50s lead more purposeful lives. Lucy talks openly about the challenges mature people face in their careers and within the workplace, and we discuss why age is being ignored in discussions about diversity and inclusion and what can be done about it. We cover a lot of really fascinating ground in this pod chat, from her views of careers advisors to reforms needed in recruitment to practical steps and advice for people seeking to switch gears in their careers when 50 plus years old. It's a really wide-ranging, engaging and value-packed discussion. Enjoy.
All right, well, my name is Lucy Standing and I'm a co-founder of Brave Starts, which is a community interest company, which is a fairly long-winded way of saying we're a not-for-profit.
Yeah, brilliant. Welcome, Lucy, and great to have you on the podcast and to share your career and the work you're doing with Brave Starts, helping people in the over 45, 50 bracket to explore their purpose within their careers and reconnect with careers and find their passion and tackle some fairly, I guess, endemic problems as well for people who are towards the latter stages of their career, and so forth. So, let's start there then. Okay, so Brave Starts. We'll talk more about Brave Starts and what it is in a minute, and we'll share that story. But what are some of the problems people are facing within society when I'm 45, so I'm just on this threshold of entering this era that people, typically might find problems when looking to kind of develop and evolve and pivot within their careers.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'm going to take it in order. We've done a survey of just over 6,000 people now who've basically answered this question for us. We said, what's your biggest barrier? And by far and away, the biggest barrier people face is they don't know what to do next. And that's a problem because there is no shortage of training courses out there. You can go online. There's literally millions and millions and millions of them. But committing to something when you're not sure about what it is that you're going to do is nigh on impossible. You only go off and do a driving test because you actually want to drive, and putting yourself through the pain of the driving test and so on and so forth is because you've got the motivation is clear in your head. Yeah. When the motivation isn't clear, then your behavior is lacking direction and people feel lost. And it's that sense of being lost that then also undermines confidence and stops people feeling able to move forward. So we get this place where people often feel like they report feeling stuck and paralyzed and just not sure what to do. So I'd say that is by far and away the biggest issue. And when I say the biggest, let's say that's to the tune of 73% of people. Wow. The next biggest issue is then ageism, and that is to the tune of 46%. So, there is a huge amount of age discrimination out there. It is the sort of thing that is not really spoken about. Nobody's going to be bold enough to say, we don't want you because you're too old. What will happen is people send off applications that they think they are completely qualified for. As far as a job description or a person spec is concerned, they tick pretty much every single box with bells. And then they get a rejection on the basis that, maybe it's just not the right fit, or maybe you're too experienced, or maybe you're just too overqualified, which of course is rubbish. And it is veiled ageism. So that's the second issue. And I'd say the third issue that most people have is, even if people have got a reasonable idea of what it is that they want to do, and even if they can get over the hurdle of not many people being that interested in them, they then usually struggle to get a job that gives them the flexibility they need. So if I give you an example, even the jobs boards targeting this area, so one of the biggest ones that's kind of known for this space of like helping the over 50s, is a website or a jobs board called 55 Redefined. And if you do a search on jobs, there'll be about sort of 65,000. The minute you flip to part-time or flexible working, the number drops to about 2,000. So the thing that, again, it's often a big driver at this stage. People need flexibility, whether it's carrying responsibilities, whether they just don't want to work 5 days a week, or maybe they do want to do 1 day a week volunteering, or going to the gym or doing whatever it is they need to do because maybe they just don't need a 5-day-a-week job anymore. Trying to find those sorts of flexible jobs at a senior enough level, again, nigh on impossible. So, I'd say those are your three biggest barriers that people face at this stage.
Interesting. So just to reflect back, people often hit a bit of a career impasse in sort of mid to late career, and they want to change for whatever reason. I'd love to know more about that, why that happens. They face ageism as well when they look to try and make that transition, if they have the clarity and the confidence to do it. And then finally, they struggle often to find a more flexible role, something that allows for other time and interests, which I guess they're developing at that stage in life.
Yeah, and if I just elaborate slightly on that last point, it's not just about the flexibility. It's the fact that organizations are not strategically thinking about this. So, you hear a lot about companies that have recruitment needs and recruitment issues, right? A huge, devastating amount of jobs that we need to fill. NHS, 100,000 roles that they're trying to fill, can't fill them. Construction industry, hundreds of thousands of roles they're trying to fill, can't fill them. And yet, if you look at these sorts of construction websites or NHS websites, the assumption is by the time you get to your 40s or 50s, you know exactly what it is you want to do. There is nothing targeting a career changer, i.e., there isn't the opportunity to join at 45 or 50 or 60 with no previous experience. So there's something for the graduates. Every FTSE 100 has a graduate scheme, but I can only name Aldi as an employer in the UK that has a career changer scheme where they are actively saying you've got no experience in this sector in the past, but we want you because we think you'd be an amazing store manager or whatever it is, and we can train you those sort of 3 or 4 weeks of the insides and the basics of the job. So that's what I mean. There's just a real lack of opportunity, because even if people want to make a change, what can they possibly change into, because there aren't the opportunities there.
It feels so short-sighted, doesn't it, when you put it that bluntly and clearly? Because, people in 45, 50 or 60 or whatever, they've had careers already for 20, 30 plus years. And all that experience, all those lovely, juicy, transferable skills, they're bringing so much to the party. Even if they're switching careers, a lot of it still comes across.
Of course it is.
They're not. Whereas actually, again, put it bluntly, graduates often don't have any of that. They've learned something, but they've not necessarily done something yet. So it does feel quite, short-sighted.
It's unbelievably short-sighted. And if you think about it, again, given that there is a bit of a recruitment crisis, you're looking across the next 5-10 years, and the only demographic that is going to grow is the 50 plus one, i.e. the number of people that you could possibly recruit from. We're going to go from about 10.5 million over the age of 50 now to being more than 20 million by 2030. So you've got an incredibly short period of time where this demographic bubble explodes. So that's the only place where there is an opportunity to recruit people from, right? The number of people at 18, 19, 21, 22, 23, those numbers are not growing. We are not having more children than we ever did in the past. If anything, we're having slightly less. So the only opportunity for growth, the only place where you could potentially get more people from is the over 50 demographic.
Yeah,
and nobody's apparently, again, according to CBI, or there's only 5% of organizations even starting to do stuff in this area, and in terms of even just talking about it, forget the doing, but at the talking stage, we're only looking at about 20% of organizations talking. This is like the biggest commercial opportunity that people are not talking about.
So I've got 2 questions, but I'll take them in turn rather than give you 2 at once. One is, on that. So why are people in the second half of their careers, let's put it that way, why aren't they highly valued by employers? What's going on?
I'm going to put it down to laziness. Because if you've always done things a certain way, right? So let's take your big 4 accountancy firms or something like that. The traditional method or the traditional business model is you recruit people in their 20s, you kill them over time slowly. And basically the ones who don't drop out are the ones you kind of slowly but surely promote through the ranks. And then as you get to sort of partner level, you kind of shuffled off out the door at kind of 50 plus, go off and do your NED work and go off and do your other things. And that is the model, right? And so because that's the way that things have always been done, why do they feel the need to change it? And even if they do possibly feel a need to change it, where is the blueprint? And where is the government incentive? If I'm sort of thinking, this is an issue, where do you start? Is it that you start with, do I do flexible working? Or is it that I do grandparent leave? Or is it that I do carers leave? Or is it that I do part-time working? Is it that I do Gym membership, because as you get older, maybe your physical health deteriorates. Is it that I offer mental health support? There are a million and one things that companies can do theoretically to improve their employer value proposition to this particular audience. But the evidence around what works isn't there. Nobody's really doing this from a systematic, let's do the group of people that are a control group and let's compare that with a group of people over 50 that we're doing X, Y, and Z testing to and see what works. And so without that kind of real, because the question I get asked all the time is, where's the return on investment, Lucy? If I do what you're suggesting I do, how are you going to prove to me that it's going to pay off? And I have to say, I can't really prove to you that it's going to pay off, but I've got very, very, very strong theoretical belief of why this will work. And all of the members in our community are saying these are the sorts of things that they want to have happen. Can you just give it a go? There's a reason why it's called leadership and not followership. But it's a huge leap of faith to do something in this area without the real clarity of knowing what to do. And I guess the other thing I'd say about that is, even if somebody does want to start making some sort of a move in this space, you've also got the ickiness of age discrimination legislation. So let's say someone with all good intentions is sort of going, yeah, you know what, I love the idea. Let's do a 50+ recruitment cohort. Maybe there's going to be somebody who goes, somebody who's under the age of 50 can't apply for that. I wonder if that's age discrimination. So it starts to tap into that slightly icky area of, you're over 50, you're going to want to have X, Y, Z. We need to give you flexible working. Well, don't put me in the lump of people over the age of 50. Everyone's got slightly different needs, and people can get touchy and picky about the kind of the D&I space. So I just feel it's one of those areas that even if people were bold enough and brave enough to want to do something about, it scares people to really take the action in this area.
Yeah. And yet, if recruitment is a real issue for some industries, then it feels wide open for innovation to jump on this and be an early adopter and be ahead of the curve like Aldi's doing.
Yeah, it is wide open. This is a massive opportunity for huge, huge, huge innovation. And recruitment has been broken for really quite a long period of time now.
Yeah.
So there is a lot of areas that can be improved.
Yeah. Just want to circle back on the other question I didn't ask, which is like, why do people in mid-career often seek to want to change careers?
Well, that one's quite an easy one. And I'm going to put it down to boredom. And that's partly because, people tell us. So there's kind of two sides to it. One is just literally bored of doing what they've always done. And then the second thing is the carrot. So, but exactly the same comment, but just said from a different angle, which is, I want to learn something new. I want to do something different, which is just language for I'm bored of doing what I'm done. And then I guess thrown into that, human nature. We've got 4 basic human drivers of behavior, and one of our main drivers is curiosity. So humans are driven to learn new things. The species that didn't learn, didn't move, didn't migrate, didn't want to understand nature, didn't want to understand their environment, died. Whereas the ones that adapted and learned are the ones. So we are a product of our own genetic legacy, and curiosity and understanding and finding out new things. These are all very, very motivating things that, drive us. And when you get to a point where you are bored and you're not learning anything new, that is a very good reason to leave an employer. When people say to me, I don't really get on with my boss, or, maybe the culture or not enough flexible working or the money or whatever it might be, then I'm like, okay, maybe these are things that you could work on, or maybe there's a coaching opportunity here. When someone says, I'm bored and I don't learn anything new at all, that's a good reason to leave, because it's such a human fundamental driver. If that need isn't being met, you won't be happy.
Yeah. And that fine line often between, I guess, challenge being a positive thing that I'm learning, I'm thriving, I'm growing, all that sort of stuff. And when that's too much, it becomes stressful as well, and sort of stretching over the edge into something where I feel totally out of my comfort zone and I'm not enjoying this as well. Just getting that balance right is really important in a career. I think when I've reflected about roles I've done in the past, I've got to the point where I think you're describing, I've seen, like, for me, like 3-year cycles where year 1, new job, enjoying, learning, thriving, growing, all that sort of stuff. Year 2, feeling an element of being quite good at what I'm doing. I'm not saying I'm an expert or anything like that, but, okay, I've kind of got this now. I'm feeling quite comfortable, quite competent, and I'm still enjoying it. And often it feels like year 3, I've kind of been doing it for 2 years now, and I'm kind of okay at this, and the challenge has kind of ebbed away. And so the challenge in, I think, anyone's career is to kind of keep that level of curiosity and challenge going, and that spiral going, ideally within a role within an organization, because that's what's good for the organization. But individuals now might want to squiggle and pivot and move to keep that growth.
Yeah, and yet very few organizations get that or embrace it or nurture it or foster it.
Yeah.
Very often, if I'm a manager of a team and I've got a bunch of people now working for me who are cruising along, they've done their 2 to 3 years, they're all in sync, and we've got it all finely tuned. There is very little motivation often for managers to encourage their employees to, go and move into another area of the organization now. I've trained you up. I've now got this nice, smooth oiled machine. There is literally very little in it for me as a manager. If somebody from my team now goes and say works in HR, they're interested in people, they want to move into that area, or maybe they want to move into operations. I get nothing, right? Very often I get nothing. And why are there not more organizations that are saying, well, for our managers that enable and support and encourage and offer job shadowing and internal mobility, let's give the ones who do the most of that a big bonus at the end of the year, or something that encourages. Even if they don't give it, even if it's not financial, even if it's some sort of internal recognition, so and so is an amazing manager because look, they've had 6 people pass through their team this year, and now they're on to these sorts of roles within the organization. What a brilliant team leader that person must be.
Yeah, absolutely. And just reflecting on the conservation and wildlife sector that we feel part of on this side of the conversation, that a lot of the sector is dominated by charities. Conservation is probably something like 70-80% charities, ballpark figure, something like that. And what we're talking about here, I guess, is like training and development, like developing, investing in your staff and their potential and their well-being. And that it feels to me like the first thing that falls away from budgets when things get tight. I think particularly within charities, obviously budgets are tight within charities, and spend can be spent in a number of different ways, and easy out, hard in, and it feels like that is an area that's probably overlooked, and it is even heightened, I think, within conservation.
Yeah, but I don't think it's a budgetary thing. I think that creating a culture that says it's brilliant to encourage this within your organization, and me as a leader, I'm going to recognize the managers that facilitate and do this. Extra title, I don't know, maybe it's putting them in the newsletter, maybe it's just a really gracious thank you, it's a acknowledgement that that's just how we do things around here. I think those sorts of things are actually, that doesn't have to cost a penny.
No, absolutely.
And longer term, you facilitate that as a culture, you tend to lose people less, because you're absolutely right. I mean, I think from your own experience, you kind of get into that 3-year, 4-year mark, and that's where you start to switch off, and the evidence shows that. Most people stay in a job between 4 to 8 years, and the factor that determines the length tends to be job complexity. So the more simple and the more boring, for want of a better word, the job is, you're more likely to check out at 4 years. Obviously, the more there is to keep you going, you're there more closer to the 8-year mark.
Or even like static and sort of evolving, I guess, as sort of ways of viewing things. We haven't talked at all about Brave Starts yet. I'm keen to kind of share what it is you're doing in this space to help people kind of evolve and pivot within their careers. So tell us a little bit about what is Brave Starts, like what's the overview. We can get to more detail.
I would say that Brave Starts is evolving, and we're kind of co-creating it alongside our members, which is shorthand for our members tell us what's working, we do more of that. Our members definitely tell us what's not working, we do less of that. The vision for where we want to get to is we want to be that kind of midlife, later life careers guidance organization. But career guidance that's got real kick and teeth in the practical space. So I guess our competitors are things like career coaches, or they are, well, I mean, it's mainly career coaches, if I'm honest. There are a couple of other organizations that in theory help people think about and go, do things like career support programs, but not really to this target group. So that's perhaps not so much of a competitor. But the career coaching space, I would say, is number one, it's expensive. Number 2 is unregulated, so you've got no real guidance around quality. Number 3, it's isolating, as in, yes, it might be you and a career coach, but actually that's not as validating as meeting another 7-8 people and having them corroborate what it is that you're experiencing, and actually finding that quite motivating. So, each time you turn up at a meeting and people are there saying, amazing, look at what you've done in the last 2 weeks, that's fabulous. I don't feel the confidence to do that. What you've done is fabulous. People really appreciate that kind of group aspect, which doesn't really exist in that career coaching space. So, essentially, we're trying to build something that's really practical. And I think the other thing that career coaching misses is that real, again, you think you want to do X, Y, or Z job, right? We're going to network you to somebody who does that job. Go and learn more about it. And ideally, when you've spoken to those 3 or 4 different jobs, now we're going to follow up. So you've learned something about 3 or 4 of them. Now go and do some job shadowing. Now go and do some work experience in the one that you've identified as being your top one. And once you've got that real insight and data as to whether or not that feels like that's the right space for you, well, now you can start applying, because now at least you've got beginnings of a network. You've got the beginnings of a story to talk about at interview. I know I want to do this job because I've done it, even only for a short period of time, but I've got a sense of it. And that does tend to be the way that we find things work. So we're just building more of those practical opportunities to network, to learn, to do work experience, to do job shadowing, but to do that in a kind of a group and cohesive, kind of collaborative way where people are constantly building their network. Because it's amazing what you don't know. And everyone's got 150, 200 people in their own network. So you get a meeting with 4 or 5 people together and you kind of brainstorm what ideas you're looking at, where you're wanting to make connections. As long as everyone's in that spirit of collaboration and helping each other, which it does help to have these things professionally facilitated. But yeah, as long as people are in that mindset to share and to be supportive, which, let's be honest, if they're not really part of the community, because that's what they sign up to. Then, as I say, it's empowering, it's motivating.
I absolutely love it. Yeah. And it parallels quite closely what we do actually with Conservation Careers and supporting people exploring the sector and looking to switch in and connecting them with like-minded people. Tell me a little bit more about the sort of the power of your community then, and how you use community members and their networks to kind of grow, expand, introduce. And I'd love to know a bit more practically, if someone's found a career that interests them, or several careers that interest them, what's the best way to actually connect with someone who might be able to talk about their, experience of that, and maybe even provide a shadowing opportunity or something like that. Yeah. We talked about that before we recorded, and I'd love to dive back into that conversation because that's really, really valuable.
Well, I think it starts being in the right community to begin with. So, if I obviously I can only really talk about Brave Starts as an example. Oh, actually, no, I can't. I used to be vice chair of something called the Association for Business Psychology in the past. Yep. And I think in both instances, you can meet other people in the community, whether it's through your own member database, or whether it's through things like, some organizations have, the kind of discussion forums and things like that. But if one of our members finds somebody else in the community and then says, hey, I'm also a member of Brave Starts, then you're already connecting people into the mentality of, you're already kind of announcing, I'm over 50, I'm interested in a career change. There's probably something in your background that I'm interested in learning more about. Can we have a conversation? Yep. And the fact that somebody else has joined up to the community and that's what we're about is more likely to mean that they're going to be receptive to that conversation. Yep. So I would say being in the right kind of a community in the first place. If you are not in a community, then your best chances are things like, the LinkedIns of the world. Mm-hmm. So if I'm going to try and reach out to somebody on LinkedIn, I would say a lot of the time with no previous experience and no obvious reason for why let's say I've been a teacher for the last 25 years. Now, all of a sudden I'm saying, I want to reach out to somebody in some sort of a role in conservation. Yep. You can try and make that connection request, but I'd probably suggest that 9 times out of 10, you're not going to find that they connect back with you. Mm-hmm. So I think there's a bit of pre-work to be done before that, which is along the lines of, well, if you are really interested in conservation, actually, what are the groups in conservation on LinkedIn that you can join? What are the articles that you could potentially share? Mm-hmm. Is there something in your about section that says, I've been a teacher for 20 years, I'd now love to move a bit more into the conservation area? Am I starting to make other connections in conservation when the person I want to connect with actually says something on LinkedIn. Maybe I comment on their article. Maybe I say something intelligent about, something that they've observed. And that's more likely to make them aware of who I am. So that when I do then reach out to them with then a personalized introduction, I'd like to talk to you because I've noticed you do this and this. I've followed you for some time. You've made some comments about X, Y, or Z that I really agree with. Can I get 5-10 minutes of your time? I'm trying to move into the sector. I'd love to pick your brains, or whatever it might be as your introduction. But as long as you put in a bit of groundwork like that, I'd say people are much more likely to then accept that request. And I'd say the same, you'll know the same goes for the other organizations that you're supporting. If people volunteer and they show willing and they're proving that they've got an orientation that's more meaningful than just a out of the blue, will you give me some time, then they're much more likely to give it. At the ABP, I would have given them much more time to a volunteer that's actually put in some time and effort than someone who just contacts me out of the blue. Or can you spend 20 minutes with my son or daughter that's interested in psychology? No, I can't. I get 25 those approaches every day. I just don't have time to talk to every Tom, Dick and Harry who's got a fleeting interest. You've got to prove that interest and show it's something more meaningful than a 20-minute waste of my time and indulgence.
Yeah, love it. And what I'm hearing, if I can put a word to that, is like immerse. Immerse yourself in the area that you're interested in, like areas. I love the idea of, joining LinkedIn groups and positioning yourself, as a person that's, leaning into this area. It might be you want to be a nature reserve warden or something like that. Well, join a warden's group, talk about your volunteering in that space and start presenting yourself and connecting to others in that area, because you'll start to become slowly known for it a little bit by bit, that network effect. But also you start to see what opportunities are out there and what are the training needs, and you start to slowly become more of an expert in that space, so that when you switch to training and when you start to apply and when you start to network, you're in a much more solid space to be going from.
Completely. And I think when you then start, let's say you do then get to a stage of somebody offering you an interview, you've then got a story to tell. Why do you think you'd be good in this job? Well, because I've spoken to X, Y, and Z. All of the things that they've said have corroborated my interest. Oh, and then, by the way, I also volunteered for 5 months. And I don't know, if I can prove that I'm willing to do something for no money, I think that shows a pretty strong orientation. By the way, when I was volunteering, I also learned this, and this. So that's why I don't think I know that this is going to be the right role for me. You're just de-risking yourself for somebody else if you've got no background in a sector, because everyone else is just trying to make sure that they don't make a mistake. And one of the best ways, past behavior is the best indicator of future behavior. What people say they do is often not a very good proxy for what they will actually do. Whereas what they've actually done is a much better route to go down. So you just have to you've got to prove more than interest. You've got to actually start walking the walk and doing and acting and behaving. And there is so much that you can communicate through your LinkedIn profile that's a much stronger level of commitment than just a cold reach out to someone you don't know.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah. So we've established, there's a huge opportunity for an aging population. People often mid-career look to pivot because they're getting bored. A great way of exploring opportunities is to position yourself, aligned to an area of interest and network with others and connect with others and get yourself up to speed on that particular area. The piece that's missing then in the conversation is like, how can people explore what are their options? I know people come to Brave Starts a lot because they're a bit lost, confused, bewildered, but they just don't know where to start. They're confused. They don't know where to go. What have you got any practical tips you could share, Lucy, about, if you're in that state, what can you do to sort of try and identify some areas you might want to kind of move into?
I would start with, and this probably feels like I'm being a bit evasive because obviously we kind of take people through these stages.
Of course. And it's a big
send them kind of like emails and workbooks and things like that. So trying to kind of summarize it briefly. But the first stage I would say is we get people up to speed with the fact that the nature of work has changed massively. So there are so many opportunities if you open your mind around the fact that, maybe you want to work just 1 day a week or 2 days a week, dip your foot in because you've still got a job that maybe you're full-time, you want to go down to part-time. So we start to open people's minds around, well, maybe you can pitch for work, as in go underneath the the umbrella of a much larger organization where there's clearly an identified problem and offer to do some work, shock horror, for free. And once you start, if there is a real problem, if there's a real opportunity, within a very short space of time, you'll probably create your own job, provided you can prove that there is some market and there's some opportunity. And that's just one example, but there are thousands of other examples, whether it's people per hour, whether it's things on LinkedIn, whether it's Elance, freelance, whether it's building your own website, whether it's going on to things like role share and doing part-time things. So there's a plethora of opportunities. We start off by kind of saying, world genuinely is your oyster, and provided you're willing to think slightly differently, i.e. outside of the just sending off a CV and an application, then actually things start to look really optimistic and really interesting. So that's step number one, is just open your eyes to the world of opportunity. And then step two is a bit of navel gazing. So actually, what are your interests? And there are all exercises that, you know, we can provide around that. But even not, you can probably get things like a career timeline exercise off of a website somewhere. We do ask people to spend a bit of time looking at the values and thinking about what are the most career defining moments that you've experienced, because that's going to tell you something about the size of the organization you want to work for. It's going to tell you something about how much money you're comfortable earning or not. There's also sort of things about the sorts of relationships you want with other people, the culture of the organization you want to work for, interests, skills. You know, your biggest pivot point is going to be the skills you already have. So we do a bit of introspection around all of that. But my best advice is it's really hard to step outside yourself. So I think try and get 3 or 4 people together who are also thinking about and considering their options. Organize a meeting, get together, share what it is you've done in terms of your exercises, and get other people to brainstorm job ideas for you. And that's just why that's quite useful is because it feels then that people have done a fairly thorough exploration of what's out there. Because I might have known about, let's say for want of a better word, say 1,000 different jobs out there. But by the time I'm talking to another 3 or 4 people who probably also know another 1,000 odd jobs, people quite often will hear that, gosh, there's a job that does that, really? Oh my, I had no idea. Oh, sure. And actually, my cousin's wife does it. Do you want me to hook you up? So there's something about the brainstorming which at least makes people feel they've done a thorough job of trying to work out and understand what's possible and what's available. So what jobs exist. And then it's just a case of, right, well, now I've got my brainstormed list of maybe 5 or 6 different jobs. Are there any on there that are just complete non-starters? I hate the idea of working with small kids, for example, and somebody said I should be a primary school teacher. So let's get rid of the 1 or 2 that I really don't like the idea of. And then when I'm left with sort of 3 or 4 that are possibles, right now I'm going to talk to them. So actually go and have conversations, because in every area that is a possible, there is going to be something tangential that even if that job isn't right, there's something else that's going to be similar. So I cannot tell you the number of times people leave this stage of the process. They go and have a conversation. One of the questions we always say to them is, on that phone call or in that meeting with someone, ask the question, who do I talk to next? So once you've given a bit about your background and a bit about all those other things, you will probably find someone saying to you, oh, well, you thought you wanted to be a well-being consultant. It doesn't sound to me like you want to be a well-being consultant. What you really want to be is a writer that does work for a well-being magazine. By the way, that person's over here. Because you get closer and closer. So you talk to a node. That node then probably has a network of very, very related jobs, very close to what they're doing. And that's where you really then start to get much more up to speed around all of the possibilities that are related to something that actually has an interest for you. And so that's why those conversations are so critical, because often they open the door to something else. And then, as I say, as you start to narrow those down and you're having those conversations, you will then land on something that is, here are my 2 or 3 options that I really like the look of. Now I've had the conversation, I've got rid of 1 or 2, so I'm down to my final 1 or 2. Now I'm going to do some volunteer work. Now I'm going to do some, I don't know, volunteer to run a project, or go and ask to do some work experience or some job shadowing. And I think the practical things around that are, you have to be prepared to put in some time, effort, and I would say money, because very often we have this misguided belief that we'll pay £2,000 for, I don't know, a coaching course, or 27,000 for a degree, or we'll spend, 97,000 for an MBA, for crying out loud. How many people go off and do a master's in environment and sustainability management or something like that? That's another 9 grand for you there, plus the year's opportunity cost of not working. So you pay money for theory, you don't pay money for practice. That doesn't seem right to me. And what's more, you're asking to take up somebody else's time, and maybe they have to do a bit of health and safety training, and maybe they've got to get you through some sort of insurance hoop. What a palaver. So you have to recognize that the work experience that you're going to get is unbelievably valuable. And if you're going to ask for it, you have to offer something in return. And shock horror, when you offer a bit of money, or you say, maybe I can make a donation to a charity of your choice, you are much more likely people turn around and go, oh, okay, you are serious. You are serious. And what's more, you'll compensate me for my time. Then it feels much more reasonable. And I would say, again, from this perspective, from this age cohort, a much more realistic and practical way of going about getting some of those opportunities.
Yeah. And what I love about that is that, you know, I believe quite firmly that experience beats education, hands down. If you can show an employer you've done something and you can do it to a certain level, it's so much more valuable than saying I've learned about something.
Yeah, I completely agree. You know, and that's what we do. So we say to people, well, we will facilitate a job shadowing experience for you, but it's going to cost money. Because I cannot go off to someone who's, like, one example, right? We had a woman who ran a call center. She thought she wanted to run a soft play kind of coffee area. Good opportunity. She found premises in Reading and everything. And I'm like, before you do that, just go and spend a day with somebody who actually runs a coffee shop, and you're going to learn everything about what coffee machine and why, how much what questions you need to quiz about the rent and blah, blah, blah. But in order for that coffee shop owner to spend a day with you, they have to hire somebody else, because they've got to make sure that the till's covered, that their manpower's covered. They're giving an awful lot of unbelievably valuable information to you. That's actually worth something. So for £400, she spent an entire day with him, and at the end of it, she decided not to open a soft play space. But much better than sinking your life savings into, and that's just one example. We've got hundreds of others, but you know, it's the most valuable investment you can make.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah. Speaking of valuable investments, I'm conscious of time, and I could talk forever to you. I absolutely, you know, I love this conversation. It's so close to what we seek to do at Conservation Careers, and we're absolutely aligned in terms of process as well, and being evidence-based. I know that's something that's really important to you. I want to switch gears. Well, before we move away from Brave Starts, one thing, like, so what do you actually offer people? Like, what are your products and programs? You know, how can people get involved? Let's just discuss that before we move on.
Okay, well, at the moment we've got 2 main levels. So we've got £30 a year, which is, I would say, very cheap. And for £30 a year, people can come to, we have about 4 or 5 meetings every single month.
Wow.
And that's a mixture of understand how your age is an asset workshops, understand how to get through LinkedIn, how to understand how networking with other members. And by the way, the people in our community, a lot of the time, are just amazing. So these are just great opportunities. But then we also have employer meetings. So we might, we've had people from charity sector. We've got someone from Met Police this month. We've got someone from the death sector. So funeral director and death doula, a death midwife, a soul midwife. Unbelievably cool jobs. We've got speech and language therapy, you name it, we'll be interviewing them. And these are people, generally speaking, as I say, who absolutely want to recruit people over the age of 50. So again, it gives people a chance to connect with actual employers. And so that's kind of the bulk of what they'll get for 30.
Can I just say that's amazing value?
Yeah, I know. Tell me about it.
Yeah.
The other thing that they get for that is we give them 4 workbooks. So when I was saying to you about those 4 stages, those workbooks then give people links to all of those exercises that they can work through. When they come to a new member welcome, the other thing we do is we say to them, do you then want to work in these kind of brainstorming cohorts together? So we will then set up the brainstorming meetings for them. But then they're on their own. So it's kind of like you go through the process and you'll be self-supervising. Nobody else is supervising or really facilitating. I'll usually kick off the first meeting and give people roles. Yeah. But outside of that, I don't do anything else. At a more expensive level, which is £495, then they do get to go through a much more formalised programme, i.e., you're then basically paying for my time or Alan's time or Katie's time. And then we take people through those stages. We actually do the introductions. We connect people up. We'll facilitate the work experience and the job shadowing. So it's a much more, if you want that hand holding, I want to get on with this and I want to do it now. And I need someone who's going to absolutely kick me up the backside and hold me accountable. Then you're basically paying for time.
Fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. Yeah. Great. Well, we'll link from the podcast if people want to find out more. We're not on commission on our side, but I think it sounds fantastic. It's wonderful.
Yeah, thank you.
Let's talk a little bit about you then, Lucy. I always like to talk about the person who's on the podcast, not just the work that they're doing. Briefly, like what's your role? Like, what's your job like? I love to kind of share what people's work is like day to day, kind of a little bit warts and all. Like, how would you describe what your actual job is to someone who has no idea what it's like to do your work?
Well, I guess my background is I am a professional chartered occupational psychologist is my official title.
Yep.
In practical reality, I specialize in supporting people kind of career development, and I've got a real particular interest around aging and healthy aging and aging psychology.
Yep.
So you combine the two, and we're really just about sort of supporting and helping people. My day-to-day job is, it's like, I guess, any small business owner. Whilst we're a not-for-profit, I've got operations to run. So part of my role is lining up events, talking to people, interviewing people before we put an event on. There's a fair amount of admin to support all of that. There's a lot of, I had a conversation with one of our members before meeting you, and he's just left his full-time job to go to part-time, and he's going to be joining, starting off doing some work experience in schools and at Forest School and things like that. So I do a lot of talking to members. I run most of our events and meetings. So at least every single day, I am running an event or a meeting or kicking off a meeting of some description. I'm also doing a fair amount of marketing activity. So at the moment, we're running a survey where I'm collating feedback from HR directors or chief executives around what are they doing in the aging space. And then we'll be producing a report around what are organizations doing in the aging space. So again, there's that activity around being a kind of a knowledge expert. I've done a lot of work recently for the government in the sense that we were giving evidence at the select committee around how to support older workers. I've really, for like the last 2 weeks, been doing all of the input, like the steps around the detail. So what is the returnship scheme, which, by the way, shouldn't be called a returnship. It should be called a career changership. But when Jeremy Hunt announced in the budget about there being support for this sort of stuff, they're now sort of going, what does that support look like? And here are the 11 steps. Here are the things that you can do. And then it's like feedback. We want more detail. We want more detail. We want more detail. So now we've been told that all of the evidence we've been given is in the final report. But that's a huge amount of time, but really important. It's going to have the most impact. And we're a non-profit. Our aim is impact and evidence-based impact. So it's worth it, but it's time-consuming.
Which you're clearly having, and it's at the right time as well. What is it you love about your work, and what is it you want to share that are maybe challenges or the stuff you don't like?
I love opening people's eyes to possibilities. When we run workshops around, informing people about how valuable their age is as an asset after they've been rejected from 300 jobs and after they've been told left, right and centre that they're overqualified and goodness knows what, they actually get to a point where they're like, shit, I've got to hide my age. I can't talk to people about how old I am. By the time I'm done with them, oh, trust me, like they're like, oh my God, my age is amazing and it's actually the best thing about me. And it's true, because everything we do is based around the evidence. So here are all of the reasons why being older makes you wiser. And if you package that up the right way, because unfortunately governments and organizations don't see it, but you can. And empowering people to take the steps they need to take and opening their eyes to the possibilities of what is possible is so, when people start having those light bulb moments and they do start making moves and they get jobs, like that's the best reward. And I look at our Trustpilot reviews and they're all coming in at minimums of 4, but most of the time they're 5 out of 5. That's incredibly rewarding. I absolutely love what I do, and we're changing things, we're moving things, we're addressing one of the most important issues societally. I'm part of that. What more can you want from a job?
Yeah, that's wonderful. Yeah. And the crappy stuff?
Zero recognition a lot of the time, knocking on doors of corporates going, we've got these amazing people you should be talking to. Do you want to have a conversation, or do you even want to come and talk to our audience directly? And we're not asking for any money. Just come and talk to them. Oh, but you know what? Black Lives Matter and all these other gender pay gap and so many other issues. Brexit, cost of living crisis, inflation, so many other things are on the agenda that you're trying to compete for space with. That's disappointing. You know, you're kind of going, we are making this as easy as possible for you. We are non-profit. We are not going to be here trying to fleece you. That is absolutely the opposite of what we're doing. We're even telling people don't spend money. I mean, the last thing you should be doing is spending money on unconscious bias training. It just doesn't work. So a lot of the time we're saving people money, or at least we could do. But those conversations are slow. You know, they're really slow burns and they take ages. And I mean, you can start talking to an organization 18 months later. You're still at the point where they're going, okay, now can you send us a pitch or a proposal? And you're thinking, I don't even want to now. I'm done. Where do you think I've got the time? I've got a bajillion other things I want to be doing. Now you need a proposal? Oh, God. I haven't even got time to send people an invoice once we've actually done work. So the admin is a bit crappy.
I feel your pain. Yeah. As we sort of start wrapping up then, what is your view? A lot of this comes down to kind of career planning and even careers advice. Like what's your view about kind of let's call it the careers advice industry, whatever that means, I guess, to you. There are careers advisors at universities and you know, for younger people and schools, and there feels like there's a bit of a lack of careers advice, you know, for people mid-career as well. Like, what's your talk to that, if you wouldn't mind?
Well, I mean, I think I'm a bit out of touch with the careers advice that gets given, certainly at that more junior level. I probably, if I was to blanket sweep careers advice in general, I would say it's far too navel-gazy. I think where the careers advisors add the most value is when they are bringing in employers, when they are educating employers around things like, don't just talk about the jobs, actually maybe change the jobs a bit. So getting employers to be a bit more on the ball with things like flexible working. So where they're educating the employers, I guess where the advisors are working both ways, you know, on behalf of the But yeah, I mean, on the whole, I'd say it's probably a bit too introspective. It's a bit too do this psychometric test, do this analysis, self-analysis exercise. And I don't think there's enough opportunities where if somebody has then said, I'm interested in this job or that job, usually it's signposting to the National Career Service, go and read about that job online, go and look at some job descriptions. They're not creating the opportunities to do the job, to feel the job, to taste the job. You know, someone wants to, you know, be a florist, really feel the alarm at 3 a.m, stand in the cold at the flower market, hear the language that people use, the visceral nature of jobs and that hands-on. I just don't see them pulling enough of that into the advice process. It should be less advice and more career advice stroke reality. If they can get closer to that, I'd be a lot happier.
I love it. Absolutely love it. Well, Lucy, I really could talk forever, you know, but I know your time's...
Me too. You've probably got a sense of that.
Yeah, no, thank you. I think we're just on the same page with a lot of this, and I'm really fascinated with what you're doing and how you're helping to make the world a better place. So thank you for sharing your time. Thanks for jumping on the podcast. Thanks for reconnecting. If people want to find out a bit more about you and particularly Brave Starts, like where should they go?
Mainly to our website, because on our website, which is literally just www.bravestarts.com, we've got opportunities on the website, contact email addresses, telephone numbers, you know, if people do want to find out more. But we've also, I mean, increasingly so over time as well, just the longer time go on, you know, the more blog posts you write, the more articles you write, the more exercises you can share. So again, it's not, I wouldn't say we're done at all, but just go to the website is your best starting point, really. It's where we do tend to keep most of the information that we want to share with the public. But better than that, join us and engage with it.
I'll absolutely recommend that. Great. Well, thank you. bravestarts.com. Go and have a look. Thank you, Lucy.
You're welcome, Nick.
Okay, well, I hope you enjoyed that, everyone. If you did, then please do hit the subscribe button to get notified of new episodes as they drop. And also, please give us a rating or a review, because it really helps us to get in front of more people. Now, if you want our help to get clear and get started and get hired as a professional conservationist, I recommend you enroll in our free online training program, exploring how to get a conservation job. So if you're a student, a job seeker, or a career switcher, you'll learn the golden rule about how to get started, the key mistakes to avoid, and also we'll answer your biggest questions. You can check that out at conservation-careers.com/free. See you soon.